on this there. And then I can share this recording with you tomorrow. So thank you all very much for coming today. As I said, this was Marie's idea. And so anytime that you find, that you'd like me to tackle some subject, send it my way. And Jean's been doing that over the years with the Camera Club presentations, and she just throws a topic out and I run with it and we see what happens with it each time. So I'm recording this, as I said, and I'll share it with you tomorrow. And let's begin. Everybody has your handouts?
Yes, I have it on the computer here.
Good. And then Marcia's coming in. She said she was running about 10 minutes late, so she'll pop in somewhere along the way. Okay, you all have been to my classes before. Everybody's done this before. So, interrupt me, ask questions anytime you want to. Nobody's muted. Feel free to just pop in there and ask me whatever. And hopefully we'll finish it at hour and a half, and you all will have some new ideas. So intentional camera movement, that's the new name for it. I think it's funny because 20 years ago, we called these motion blurs. And then suddenly we had people who became ICM experts. And it was like, what in the heck is an ICM? And that is the new name for it. So if you're old fashioned, you can call them motion blurs. And if you want to be new and trendy, you can call them intentional camera movements. But what it is it is a photograph where we have camera movement in it. Now, sometimes your camera movements, and I'm sure all of you all have already figured this out, sometimes your camera movements are happy accidents, such as this 50th of a second shutter speed on the side of my camel in Morocco, but it had good bones and it had good structure. And so I didn't necessarily want to throw it away. And that's the reality of how a blurry photograph works. So I ended up throwing some textures over it. And over the years, I've done all kinds of different things on it. If you haven't done textures yet, there's a class coming up next week on a master's level on textures. I think, Laura, you did textures, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, she did the textures. And then Becky and Jean, you all have done textures. But this is
I'm signed up. I'm signed up for that.
Cool. Okay, it's good. And this is where we throw textures over a photograph. And sometimes it's a way to salvage a photograph that otherwise doesn't quite fit the criteria for what you want. And other times happy accidents come along with slow shutter speeds. And so this would officially be an intentional camera movement, even though it wasn't intentional at the time, but it's a motion blur. Another motion blur of a Magpie J, just one of those that, you kind of like the structure of it, you like the bones of it, you like what it portrays. So it's okay to keep it. Sometimes, it sort of works, and then other times it's a little bit more pleasing. So we'll talk about some of these type of motion blurs as we're going along. But intentional camera movements, simplest would be panning left to right. So all of these are going to involve a slow shutter speed. So you're standing somewhere and you see, like in this case, autumn colors reflecting in some water. So you think, okay, so that's one shot. So we would need a faster shutter speed to stop the movement of the camera and stop the movement of the water in this case. But then if we take the shutter speed and we move it down into the 50th of a second, or maybe even 60th of a second, 50th of a second, 40th of a second, somewhere in that range. And then we move the camera left and right. Okay, so now we're getting this. So we're just simply moving the camera to the left or to the right as we take the picture. So you might look on the back of your camera and say, oh, okay. And then we're going to try another one with maybe even a slower shutter speed. So go down into the 20th of a second or 13th of a second. So now we're just working with some colors. And by the way, these type of photographs that have kind of really no structure to them, I am saving these as backgrounds. And I just went to Costa Rica. We needed a couple of backgrounds so for some hummingbird photography that I was doing. And also we needed some backgrounds for when we did some frogs, some little poison dart frogs, tiny little inch-long frogs in the jungle. And so these type of blurry photographs are also good for your macro shot backgrounds because they are natural colors and we don't have to worry about the colors not matching or not balancing. We can also pan up and down if the structure of your photograph has a vertical structure to it. So if your photograph has a vertical structure to it, then you might want to pan up and down as opposed to left and right. These bamboo had this really neat coloration to them. So this, this kind of really cool grays and burgundies and burnt oranges mixed in with the greens. So the one on the left is a faster shutter speed as I'm moving the camera up and down. And all I'm doing here is just moving the camera up and down. You can hold it to your eye if you want to, but you're just moving the camera up and down. The one on the right-hand side is a longer shutter speed. So moving the shutter speed maybe down to a 20th of a second or a 15th of a second. Which shutter speed you go with depends on what your outcome is. And I'll warn you ahead of time, sometimes there's nothing. It doesn't look good, but you're standing next to somebody. So Becky and Jean and I are all standing next to each other, and Becky's going to get a great shot, but I'm going to get nothing but trash. And that's the way it works on some of these. It's a serendipity. It's not a total calculation. I can't tell you that absolutely your shutter speed has to be this and your f-stop has to be this, but your meter has to be balanced, obviously. But I find that going into that 20th of a second or 30th or 40th of a second works better. But this is where you just got to play. You just got to sit there and take 15 or 20 photos, especially if you find something that's got good structure to it. There's a picture there. Whether we can get it today is another story. So, here we've got some kind of autumn colors. We've got a sky. You can tell that in this intentional camera movement. We've got some water down on the bottom. You can tell that. But this one's not horribly interesting. And I don't find it interesting because it has that really bright area up on top and the really bright area down on the bottom. And if you go back to your composition elements, we know that the eye always goes to the brightest area of the frame first. So that bright area on top and that bright area on bottom are going to distract the eye. And then there's nothing really strong going on here. But instead of moving the camera so high up and so high down, well, maybe we zoom in a little bit just on the colors and do just a tiny bit of moving the camera up and down. So now we're getting a little bit better. We're not getting that huge glare up on top. The huge glare down on the bottom isn't there. So now we're looking a little bit better. We're kind of getting in the zone, if anything. Maybe it needs just a little bit more zooming in. And now staying away from that bright area up on the top, and then just kind of bringing in the little bit of the blue in the bottom. So again, to me, I don't think it's a super strong standalone image, but it gives you an illustration of sometimes we've got to work with what we've got and figure out where the photo actually is as we're moving the camera in our up and down movement or our vertical movement. This I like a little bit better. This was just a whole bunch of leaves in a marsh, and some of them were burgundy and some of them were this bright, bright green. So moving the camera up and down, I found that I liked this a whole lot better, but it had, once again, kind of an interesting coloration to it that made it fun. And this is a slower image so that you can see a little bit more of what I was working with. So it's got that marsh grass that's brilliant green, and then that marsh grass that's a bit more on the rufous or rusty color. And so we end up getting a bit more of a playful image as we're moving that camera around. This one just turned out for me to be magic. I could have sat here at these reeds in Big Bend National Park and just moved this camera up and down forever and ever and ever. The wind was blowing really hard, and so the reeds were also moving. We had the brilliant blue sky, great coloration on the reeds, And then down at the bottom, we've got a really nice coloration on the reeds too. So now at that 15th or 20th of a second shutter speed, moving the camera up and down, we've got wind blowing, we've got blue sky at the top. And if you think about it, going back to your composition, we have got yellow and blue. We've got two primary colors together. We've got that golden and that blue. So we've got this two primary colors together, which is always a striking photograph when you can get those goldens and those blues together. So move the camera here and we get this one shot, move the camera here and we get this other shot, move the camera here and we get another shot. So how much of the upper reeds do you want the wind to blow? How much of the lower reeds do you want your audience to be able to see? Sometimes it's nice to have a bit of an anchor point so that your audience can maybe kind of figure out what you're photographing as opposed to going into a total abstract. This is where you got to work it, figure out what it is. So what do you think about this idea?
You mean going up and down, or do you mean the idea of zoning in so we could see?
All of it.
I mean, I love I didn't even think about going up and down. And my question is, like, the wind is moving, right? You're going up and down with the camera. Are you on continuous shoot where it just nonstop?
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's beautiful.
So when I do these, I put my camera on rapid release. So that's the 3 pieces of paper on top of each other. Unless you're a Nikon, and if you're a Nikon, it's the CH. And then just fire. Don't take one at a time, just fire. Just move the camera up and down and continuously fire.
Is rapid release multiple exposure? Okay.
Right.
And then you combine them in.
I haven't combined anything yet.
Okay.
These are just individual shots.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Each
we're not.
Kathy,
okay.
not to beat a dead horse, but do you mean like continuous shutter release?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly.
Oh,
Welcome
okay.
in, Marcia. Yeah.
Finally made it.
That's okay. You made it. Yes.
Kathy, I have a question, because this one in particular looks like a very bright day. How do you keep your shutter open long enough for that to happen?
So you would be low ISO, of course.
Okay.
And then
you
this
want the
might-
minimum low?
Yeah, minimum ISO. So
Okay.
this is a bright day. So this might be f22.
Okay. All right.
Trying to get yourself a slow enough shutter speed. And then that rapid release, whatever it takes on your camera. So Jean, I know, is Canon, Carrie's Canon. Marie, you're Olympus, right?
No, Canon.
Canon. Becky,
Nikon.
Nikon. Marcia,
Sony.
Sony. Okay. And then Laura?
Canon.
Canon. Okay, good. Okay, so everybody kind of knows what we're talking about now. So your multiple release. And so this is in almost all of these. This is taking one picture after the other because you're never sure exactly where the good one is going to be. And then just remember, sometimes you're throwing stuff away. So, or a lot of stuff away. Sometimes it's trash. But with me on this one anyway, the solidness of these couple of reeds at least adds a bit of an anchor point so that it's not just a total blur for the eye.
Well, and you can kind of see what it is.
You can
like
kind
you
of see
said.
what it is. Exactly. Exactly. Sun hitting marsh grasses in the morning. And this is where you've got to watch out for these shaded areas down here. Up at the top, you might have a too bright of an area. And I think originally it was too bright up on the top because the light was brighter up in there. So this is just a tiny movement, just up and down, just a tiny movement. And so just, moving the camera up and down like this, not too much, watching to make sure that you're not hitting into a real bright area or that dark area isn't overpowering. But it's just marsh grasses early in the morning. But think back to the colors. So we've got oranges and greens and blues. So we're working with some of those compositional colors that really pull out, that really draw the eye to them. So just playing around with that one. So this is just a simple up and down.
Kathy,
Mhm.
I'm a little confused about one thing, and we can go back just a second on the rapid release part.
Yes.
So you've got your camera set for whatever, maybe an f/22, a low ISO,
Mhm.
low speed. So you're going to go click, 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 but you're doing up and down all that time. So you're getting all
Exactly.
these individual shots. And
Exactly.
somewhere in those 100 shots, you might find a beauty. Is
Exactly.
that what we're saying? Okay.
Yeah. You might find the treasure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But so on that note, when we were saying multiple release before, is that the same as multiple exposure?
It's not multiple exposure. No, no,
Okay.
no. So Marsha, on your camera, it's going to be the 3 pieces of paper. On the back.
Yeah, the icon.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Marie. Marie,
Oh,
it's going to be your 3 pieces of paper.
And what's it on the
Oh.
R6 then?
It's under it's same thing. It's your 3 pieces of paper, Jean, on your drive.
Okay.
Where is it again? I'm sorry.
It's on the
Trying to find
menu
it.
on the back, Marie.
Okay.
So it
Menu
should
on the
be your
back.
drive.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got it. It
Mhm.
says H and then there's 3 of them after
Correct.
El Servo. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a question because
Yes.
my camera has high speed continuous and then the silent
Mhm.
continuous. Do you think the silent doesn't work as well, or
The silent
know,
on some of the
there's-
cameras, and I'm not sure on yours, but the silent on some of the cameras also gives you a smaller file. So
Okay.
I would only use the silent if I were shooting in a museum or a church.
right?
But otherwise on your camera, you've got the CH and the CL, correct? Up on top, top
It's-
left.
It's just the 3 high speed
The 3 pieces of
continuous,
paper.
low speed continuous, and then the silent continuous.
Okay. Okay. You don't have a H continuous?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it's the high speed.
Yeah, that's what I would use is the high speed. Mhm. Yeah, for this one anyway.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was
Yeah.
just curious about the silent thing. 'Cause
Okay,
I had
yeah,
heard
yeah.
it wasn't as good. So
Yeah, and that's where you got to
Okay.
test your camera because we did test those on one of the camera bodies many years ago, and it turned out you got smaller files.
wow. I
So
didn't know
just
that.
test that to make sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So you get something like this. So we've got, we've got some colors in there, we've got some structure in there, but it's really not anything spectacular. But yet keep playing with it, and we might end up with something that we sort of like. So sometimes this is a little bit faster shutter speed. This is a little bit, whoops, I'm sorry. This is a little bit slower shutter speed. So this is a play. This is a go ahead and play with it and see what you get because it's not precise. So it's a play and see what you get. So last autumn come on, there you go. Last autumn in my area, the famous tallow trees. So Marie up in New Jersey, these are the trees that give us our best color, but they're total invasive species. And so we only like them for fall color, but that's,
Right.
but anyway, okay, so I've got blue sky or sort of blue sky. It's an overcast day, so I've got good color on the autumn leaves. I've got some green down at the bottom, and then I've got some tan down at the bottom. This should have potential. And okay, doing an intentional camera movement and see what we get. And I end up taking 20 or 30 photos. And these are all, by the way, done with my 100 to 400 millimeter lens. So these are done with a telephoto lens because that's what I happen to have on for the birds that day. So you can do this with any lens you've got on your camera. And then just moving it up and down, it ended up not being as great as I thought it would be. But I ended up with, 15 or 20, 30 photos that I could at least play with and see whether once I got them on the computer, they had any structure that was worth playing with. So sometimes you're going to see all the necessary elements, but it doesn't necessarily mean it all pulls together. Sometimes it's magic, sometimes it's not. So that's the beauty of intentional
Oh.
camera movement or motion blurs.
Kathy, do you remember what lens you used for the previous slides? Was it all different?
So this
Previous-
one,
No, but all the ones.
all the
before-
other ones are more in that 24 to 105 range.
Okay.
But you can do this with any lens you've got on your camera. So you can also pan in a circle, and this becomes a bit more complicated because you're doing this with your camera. So you're moving your camera in a circle. So you can also pan in a circle to do intentional motion blurs. There we go. One second.
Wow.
There we go. So
Mm.
panning on us in a circle here, it doesn't quite work. So this is just looking down at the flowers and the green and then moving the camera in a arc, in a circle. This doesn't quite work. But if you put this flower in the middle, now we're starting to work a little bit better. Now this is slightly different because I'm jumping ahead a bit, but this is not necessarily panning in a circle. This is panning up and down. So I started on the focus point on the flower, and then as I moved the camera, I moved the camera up. So this is just to point out that if you're going to use a flower, then the previous photo with the focus point off to the side or the rotation to the side doesn't work because there's not a flower over there. But if you're going to do that rotation, you probably want whatever your subject is to be right in the center. So now I can do a little bit better playing around. Once again, not quite what I want it to be, but panning in a circle. You can also do a flow pan. So flowing along a mountain ridge or flowing along sweeping hills. We don't have too many mountains or hills that I can work on, but we do have waves. And so this is a pan in a movement along the waves. So if you do happen to have any sort of ridge line where you are, then don't think that you always have to go either circular or up and down or horizontal. You can move the camera in a pattern also. So you can
So
move it. Go ahead.
You're moving in a wave.
I'm moving in a wave. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So I'm moving in a wave here. So-
If we could go back to that flower, you said you were doing it up and down. It
Uh-huh.
almost looks like you were pulling back when you were showing
Uh-huh.
us.
Exactly.
Like, are you pulling back as well?
I'm
like
I'm
in-
not zooming the lens yet. I'm just bending in and then pulling back up.
So your body's
Uh-huh.
doing
Yeah,
it.
my body's going in and out. Yeah, so
Gotcha.
I'm not moving the zoom yet. We're going to move the zoom
Okay.
in a minute.
Okay, I've got a question about the circular panning.
Sure.
So are you just doing this? Okay.
Exactly. But it works a lot better if you keep your subject right in the center. So if your subject, and if you're not keeping your subject in the center, it just doesn't look quite as good. Random pans are just where you move your camera all over the place. So nothing says that this has to be organized. So this is simply a kind of like this, but then if you notice down at the corner, I obviously did something else. So there's kind of it's just a movement. That's all it is. So it's just a random movement. And this is some sort of lighted object and just playing around with moving the camera. Low ISO, low shutter speed. We're coming into night here so we can use that low shutter speed. And it's just a movement of the camera around with some other little movements. Might throw it away, might get something you like. Okay. And then vibration pan. And I do not have a good illustration of vibration pan, but I just want to throw it out for you all. Vibration pan is where we vibrate the camera back and forth. And I don't have a good example, but it is possible. So it's just a vibration of the camera back and forth. But blurring, motion panning, intentional camera movement from a car or a train can be a lot of fun. Has anybody done this where you photographed out of a car or a train and used a slow shutter speed? Becky, you've done it?
Yes,
No.
but not intentionally.
Exactly. It's intentional if we got a good picture and we decided to use it, right?
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
this is intentional camera movement from a motorized, not motorized, bicycle powered vehicle. So one of those little ones that you take in tourist locations. And this is just a slow shutter speed as we're going down the street in the little, whatever they call those little things. Anybody have a word for that? Because want to call it a tuk-tuk, but the tuk-tuks are rickshaw kind of thing. Exactly.
Not a Vespa, though.
Not a Vespa, no. So this, you could do this on a motorcycle or a car. You could do this out of a train, a bus, but this is just one of those little bicycle powered vehicles. So you don't need a super fast shutter speed for this, but rather than just trying to capture scenes with a fast shutter speed, this is just going down into the 20th of a second or 30th of a second, going ahead and letting the lens wide angle out a bit and then just shooting and seeing what you get. And I ended up finding it a heck of a lot more fun than, once I'd already done my street scenes, and this just ended up being a lot of fun just to see what I got. Here's another one. And then that focus point is probably like right in here somewhere, but you're really not, you're not intentionally focusing on anything. So how long your shutter speed is, 15th of a second or 4th of a second or 30th of a second or 20th of a second. It's kind of going to depend. You're going to need to get in there and play around with it and see what you're getting. So taking some at one shutter speed and then some at another shutter speed and some at another shutter speed. I love this one because of the out of focus way off in the background. I wish that the sky wasn't as bright, but then that's just the way it is. But then the colors. So one of those colorful street scenes that you might be going down, playing around with that. So this is taking just out of, slow moving bicycle type vehicle. And then we've got zoom blurs. So now we're going to use the zoom on our lens. So instead of moving the camera left or right, or instead of moving the camera up or down, or instead of moving the camera in a circle, we're going to zoom the lens in or out. If you're using a fixed lens, you could do the same thing by walking in or out. So this is a zoom blur. Oops, come on. There we go. Sorry, computer's slowing up on me and speeding up on me. So this is a zoom blur. And because I'm standing still, the image is radiating from right in the center. And then as I'm taking the click and zoom, so whatever it takes shutter speed to let me click and zoom all the way out or click and zoom all the way in. Whether you zoom out or zoom in is totally up to you. So all this is just holding the camera and zooming out or zooming in.
Do you use a tripod?
No, no, this is just handheld. So it would be a whole lot steadier. I'll show you one at night where I would use it, where I'm on a tripod anyway, but this is just a simple handheld and then just zoom in and out. And this is just graffiti on a wall. So one more way to photograph graffiti. And here's, once again, just one more way to photograph graffiti. And it's interesting in this case that the zoom kind of solidifies over here on the side versus in the middle. Probably couldn't recreate that if I tried. And then here, doing the same graffiti, and the zoom is right up here, but you see, it's like, it's a shorter and longer. So how long each one of them takes, that's the creativity. So you never know till you look on the back of the camera at these. So zoom blurs. Zoom blur, moving out. And then that blurs the stuff over at the edges. And then just holding the camera gives us a bit of a blur anyway. So this is a
Where is
very
this?
short one. Whatever this is very short.
Where
Comment from
is
some,
this?
this was in Granada in Spain. It was just a great street of nothing but graffiti.
Kathy,
Yeah.
excuse me, can you tell whether you've zoomed in or zoomed out by looking at the image? Because you've got two choices, right?
Yeah, I suspect this is a zoom out because the edges are kind of coming out this way. So I suspect it's a zoom out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it like a faster? Like
This is
one
a
over 30th
faster,
type thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now in the series, if I go back and look in the catalog, in the series, there are some with a slower shutter speed and some with a faster shutter speed. And that's where you just need to play. Because I happen to like this one today. But when I was editing the pictures, I kept all of them. So I liked them all for different reasons. And then this is where the graffiti, this is the wall between this piece of graffiti and this piece of graffiti. So standing perfectly between the two, focusing on the wall and then zooming out. So the focus point is the wall between the two pieces of graffiti.
Mm.
Kind of fun, isn't it?
Definitely.
And then this
Wow.
is another type of motion blur. And this is zooming all the way out and then focusing on the people as they're walking by. And then with that slow shutter speed, zooming back. So going from telephoto to wide angle. So zooming back. So we get the blur coming back. Yeah.
So you go in and out? Is that how
This
you?
is just one movement. Mhm.
Okay,
yeah.
so going back then.
So
Just
you
going back.
start zoomed and then hold the camera and zoom back and get
I
the
gotcha.
blur coming back. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So you see, you all see where I am. And instead of just taking one more crowded street picture, and this is one of those villages in Italy that's overrun by tourists. And so we can't get a pure street scene. Well, okay, let's play. Let's see what happens.
You can create stories this way, can't you, in people's minds when you see something like that instead of the buildings too.
Yeah.
You wonder, what are we looking at? And specifically, is it the buildings or is it the people? This is kind of cool.
Yeah. And luckily that guy in the purple jacket.
Yeah.
That really made it better.
Another one when it finally, there it goes. Sorry. There we go. Just light coming, once again, the crowded street, people coming, man coming down the street. We know what it is, guy on with a briefcase. We know what it is, and it's just a zoom. And then when another crowd of people goes up, it's another zoom. So who knows what we're going to get? But if we don't stand there and take 15 or 20 photos, then we don't know. We never know.
Those are eerie. They look like the chosen at the end of the world.
Oh.
See, each one of you are going to read something totally different into it, aren't you? But it's just
That's the
it's just a
beauty of
narrow
it.
passageway. Yeah. Somebody said something.
I said, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now here's another zoom. So flower garden, you all can figure this out. So we've got some poppies, we've got some salvia, we've got some kind of yellow composites. You all can figure this out. And this is a don't do this shot, because as I zoomed out, holding my focus point on the red poppy, so that's where I started and then zoomed out from there, then I ended up hitting the wall of the house. Okay, so this is a watch what's in your way, because, you know, yeah, we're okay kind of down in here and we're okay over in here, but this white thing over here doesn't add to the photograph at all. Now, instead of with the intentional camera movements where we're moving the camera around, by the zoom, we end up getting a little bit more precise pull out here. So that zoom gives us that more precise zoom out that we're getting in this case. So, okay, this is a redo. Take, 20 pictures and realize that when I'm looking at them that I've got that wall in it. Okay, so we got to redo this one. We've got to position in another spot, move around, not zoom out as much. We got to figure out how to redo. And then when we, come on. There we go. Sorry. Forgive me. When I redo, now I'm getting more of what I want. So now I'm zooming out on just that one flower, and I don't have that wall over on the side of it. So I don't have as much of a zoom, but I don't have the wall over on the side of it. Now that I've got that one flower right in the middle, what happens if I do a circle? So now I'm going back to this thing right here. So I've got what I'm looking for. I've got the reds and the blues and the greens and the yellows. I've got my colors, I've got my subjects. And so now what happens if I do this? So we just kind of play with this because we've got the subject that we're looking for. And now it's time to get a bit more creative. So I take one solid picture and then I layer it on top of my blurred. So now we're working in layers, and I'm taking that circular blur or that zoom blur, and now I'm putting one solid picture in front of it. And so I'm just taking one solid and one blur and then putting them into layers and then erasing out the solid portions that I want. Jean? I thought you had a question.
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Just how do you do it?
So this is a good way to learn layers. And so, Marie, if you need help with this, or if you want some instructions, I'll email you some instructions, or if anybody wants them, I'll
Great.
email them to you. This is just a real simple 2-photograph layer. And this is a good way to learn your black brush and your white brush and how to paint through them and that type of stuff. So this is just a good introduction to layers.
That one's a lot of work, though. It looks like, with all the erasing you might have had to do.
But you know me, Jean. If it takes longer than 5 minutes, I've lost the attention span. So really, it didn't take long at all. No, not
I'd
at all.
like that set of instructions as well,
Okay,
please.
okay, I'll send them to all of you all, okay, on how
Thank
to do
you.
this. But no, this didn't take very long at all. So it's probably just a brush here, a brush here, a brush here, a brush here, and then a swath of bright brush down in here. So probably not very long at all. Some of you all would spend a lot longer on it and make it more perfect, but that's about as far as I go sometimes.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of overlaying still on top of blurred. And it's a good way, once again, to learn layers, get the very beginning of layers that we'll eventually start doing for textures and all kinds of other things. And a zoom blur, holding and not holding. So when you take your zoom blur like we just did, where we zoomed, when you click, do you hold for a minute to imprint your subject and then blur? Or do you just click and start blurring, or click and start blurring, or click and start blurring, or click and start blurring? Sometimes when I'm doing a zoom blur, I will just click, 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 click. And all I'm doing is zooming back and forth the entire time. So going in and out and in and out and in and out. But if you want to imprint your subject, then you're going to have to click, don't zoom, and then zoom. So it's a hold and then zoom. And Becky, you asked about a tripod. This is the night shot in the Venice Plaza, St. Mark's Plaza. And so this is cameras on tripod, probably a 30-second exposure, click, and then zoom. And I suspect on this one, it was a click, zoom, and then hold at the higher magnification. So this would, because this is what's down here at the beginning of the photograph. So this is probably holding more at the end. So it's a click, click, zoom back, and then hold at the end. So this imprint right up here of the wall is what we got down in here originally. So where you hold on your zoom is whether you want to emphasize your subject or not emphasize your subject. So if you kind of don't want to emphasize it, then just do a steady zoom all the way back. But by doing a slow zoom, we get the walls coming back through here, and then we get that imprint going in. Kind of interesting effect, isn't it? Yeah. Whoops, there was another one in there. There we go. Same pink thing that I showed you a while back. And then this is just not holding at all so that the viewer doesn't see what's in the center, and just slowly zooming all the way out. Cameras on tripod here also for the night photography. So it's just a slow zoom out, but no holding on one direction so that we don't get in the imprint, so the viewer doesn't have any idea what it really is. So holding on your zoom either at the beginning or at the end so that you can imprint a little bit more so that your viewer knows what they're seeing. And now we got a motion pan. And I've taught some of you all this in basic photography, and some of you all have done this when we've gone out on the street before. But this is a motion pan, moving the camera from left to right with a shutter speed of 1/60th of a second. Now, why 1/60th of a second? Just because it is. Okay, we figured this out a long time ago. So it's like water blurs at 1/8 of a second. We figured that out a long time ago. A motion pan like this at 60th of a second just works. And so we're going to go shutter priority. And you all know, a lot of y'all know I shoot mostly aperture priority, but this is shutter priority, 60th of a second. And now we're going to move the camera with the subject, and we're going to fire like crazy as we're moving the camera with the subject. And if you can keep the camera going at exactly the same speed as the subject, in this case, the dog running at the dog park, then we're going to somewhat freeze the subject. Whoops, sorry. There we go. We're going to somewhat freeze the subject. And then we're going to blur the background. We're going to get this streak on the background. And so here's on bicyclers, and bicyclers, cars, motorcyclers, runners. This is one of the things that I really like to do with them. But this is 60th of a second shutter speed. Probably you're going to have to lower your ISO or take a couple of shots ahead of time to figure out what you can do to 60th of a second. And then rapid release. And then as the bicyclers go by you, if you can keep that one bicycler in the center of your frame as you're moving the camera, then you're going to be able to freeze the bicycler. If you move too fast, they all blur, and the background blurs too. If you move too slowly, then they all blur. So you've got to keep your camera moving at the exact same speed as the bicycler. And then if you can do that, then you freeze that, but you streak out that background. And that streaky background is what we're going for. And that sense of motion is what we're going for.
And that 60th of a second is to give the subject a little bit of a blur in order to suggest that they are moving.
That 60th of a second apparently stops the coordination of movement between us and the subject. So that 60th of a second, you could do this with a race car, you could do this with a running horse, you can do it with a bicycle. That 60th of a second is apparently what gives us the stop without too much stop. Because if we went to 4,000th of a second, we're going to stop the bicycle completely and stop the background. But that 60th of a second is apparently the sweet spot.
Okay.
So you have this on like an ISO of 100 or 200?
Whatever it took to get a proper exposure at 60th of a second.
Okay.
And shutter speed of a 60th of a second, shutter priority. So that as I'm moving, it's moving at the f-stop to keep me in balance. But as I'm moving the camera, it's fluctuating the f-stop, but keeping my shutter speed the same.
Gotcha.
That's what the key is keeping the shutter speed the same. So for me, I find this on 60th of a second. It's one of the few times, by the way, that I use shutter priority. So since I only use it at 60th of a second, when I flip to shutter priority, that's how my camera stays set. Most of your cameras just say set there if you don't move it around. So I can change this rapidly if I need to. So motion blur. Here's another type of motion blur. So once again, intentional movements. And here's another type of motion blur. This is the Ferris wheel, Kemah Boardwalk, but all of you all probably got a Ferris wheel somewhere in your world. And as that Ferris wheel is going around, oops, come on. Back. As that Ferris wheel goes around, I'm sorry, there we go. As that Ferris wheel goes around, because it's nighttime, I'm also using a flash. 60th of a second, shutter priority, turn the flash on. And now I'm moving my camera with the Ferris wheel, and you only get one shot because the flash has to recharge. So I'm focusing on that zebra Ferris wheel as it comes around, and then I'm clicking, and that 60th of a second, I keep the camera moving. And then you just wait for the next animal to come around. But the flash is what lights it up, and the 60th of a second is what stops it. So combining the two. And of course, many of them don't work, and occasionally they work. That's what you're going for. Questions on this one or motion blurs with this one? Give you an idea? Yeah. If the kid or the grandkid will sit on the carousel, then this is a great shot.
Now, Kathy, if I'm not mistaken on this, sometimes the center part is going one way or it's stationary, and then the animals move.
Exactly. And that's what's happening here, Becky, because since I'm moving with the animal, then that's giving me all that blur in the background. But I've got that color, that light and that color that's going to blur. And so as I'm moving that camera and then the flash hits the animal, then I'm getting all that blur in the background.
It's a really nice contrast. I like the black and white with the yellow streaks.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this cool little, whatever it is, this little blanket that was on the horse. Yeah. Or the zebra. Yeah.
Oh,
it's fun.
He was moving.
Uh-huh.
And you're holding still.
Uh-huh.
And the insides maybe going the opposite direction.
I think the inside's probably not moving at all.
Not moving at all.
I bet you the inside's not moving. And then this one too is a tripod, but I'm not locked down on the tripod because I have to move. So that prevents some other kind of up and down movement. So it's just a loose tripod going this direction.
Looks like fun.
I saw someone do this, and I was curious of how it was done, but it was done in Africa, and they were waiting for this impala to run by, and the guy was doing it and keeping steady and going left to right, and the picture came out so amazing.
Yes. And sometimes, when you're doing wildlife, okay, we've got how many running impalas do we need, or how many flying birds do we need? Well, let's go to a slow shutter speed and do a motion blur. And if we keep, and in those animal shots, if we can keep the eye in focus, then it's magic. Yeah.
I think it depends also on how heavy your camera is.
Yeah. And then we can have stationary with motion blurred. So this is just a carnival game. but the stationary in the background isn't moving, but the center of it is moving around. So cameras on tripod, keep it steady, lower the shutter speed, and then just photograph the movement going around. So movement, something different. Oops, there we go. And that's just a concentration on that center point. So just working on that movement of that center point. So camera's not moving in this case, the object is moving in this case. So ideas, things to throw out to you.
Okay.
So let's put these together in a little bit different fashion. Let's play with it. So I saw all these trees, overcast day, so I don't have a whole lot of shadows. I see all these trees and they're all kind of going in the same direction. They've all got good structure. So this tells me this is a pretty good motion blur. So I could obviously do an up and down on this one. Slow shutter speed, start down at the bottom and move the camera up. So it's just a slow shutter speed, move the camera up, slow shutter speed, move the camera down, slow shutter speed, move the camera up. So just one shot each. And then positioning myself, let's go back to the original photograph, positioning myself so that I've got some movement on the left, some movement on the right, or some solidity on the left and the right. And then moving it and going, oh yeah, this has got strong potential here. So just not too much movement, because you see that I'm not going very far, but it's just finding these areas that have potential for you. And then let's take those two shots into a layer. And now I've got this more solid on the bottom and the blurry up at the top. And this is done with a graduated filter so that it's black on the bottom and gray as we're moving up. So this is overlaid with a graduated filter in layers. And then playing around with a little bit of a brush to kind of streak up and down. So not too complicated of a layering structure at all, but I like these. I like these a whole lot. And I like playing with these. And then here's another one. I've got a good structure here, fairly overcast, not a lot of cloud, of shadows, just a simple move it up and down. We've got some organization to the photo, simple move it up and down. Here's the solid photo.
Mm.
And then put them together. And then I noticed that I didn't wipe that out. I should have wiped that out right there. So I need to go back in here and do it over again, take a brush and wipe that little area out right there.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot you could play with. And since there is one solid photo in here, whoops, right there, you could theoretically have a person right here. So you could have a person walking in your finished product. And how much you know, if you blurred them out, or you know how much you blurred them would be your creativity. But I like these a lot. I like playing with these. I think these the overlays to me are just add a lot more dimension to the photograph.
A tripod for this one too, or no?
No, handheld. Handheld. One of those, just, you know, walking down the trail and going, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And then stopping and taking a couple of pictures and then keeping up with the rest of the group. Yeah, so no tripod. You might make it a bit more precise if you had a tripod.
I like it just like this. This is gorgeous.
Yeah, little bit on the dreamy side. And then here's another one. The motion blur works. So the intentional camera movement works. And then here's moving the camera various directions. So this is just same scene, but just kind of a jagged movement. And then here's putting them together. So the jagged movements down on the bottom and then the blurry movements up at the top. So just playing. And then this is called the Ventosa technique. And I had to grab this from the internet. So I'm sorry. I have not yet done a good mastery of this. But it's holding the camera and taking 20 or 30 shots of the exact same thing. So a street lamp, a tree in a field. You can even do this with a human. So it's just holding the camera and just firing off 20 or 30 shots. How fast you fire, they're going to be more solid. If you fire slow, so take it off the 3 pieces of paper rapid release and move it down to the low and just click, 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 click. Your movement, their movement is going to create some movement in the photograph. You can zoom if you want to as well, or you can move if you want to. And then in your Photoshop layers, you put them all together. So you open them all out of Lightroom or out of Bridge into Adobe Photoshop layers. And the main subject stays pretty solid, but not totally solid. You can align them, like if you were doing a tree or if you were doing a street lamp, you could align them a little bit more. So you could line up each one of the layers so that that street lamp lined up or that tree lined up. And then you can play around with the opacity of each layer and mask if you want to. And usually when you blend in the normal mode, this is the way it works better. So if you did one shaky picture, that could give you a fairly shaky background, but then you held the camera a little bit more steady for one picture, that could give you a bit more solid. And as I say, I have not yet taken a worthwhile photo of this. And I thought I would work on it when we were in Costa Rica. And of course, it just slipped my mind completely. So I haven't come up with an interesting shot. So when you come up with a really good one, share it with me, okay? But this is called the Ventosa technique. Anybody tried? No? Okay. Okay, good. So you all tried this and we'll all try it and then we'll see, we'll share it with each other when we get it. I like this one of there's just the flower. I think that's got some possibilities. And then I gave you a couple of things that you can play with just on your handout. And these are simple, just taking it into Photoshop. So this is a motion blur that you can get in Photoshop. And so here, for instance, this is just a photo of the Celeste River, Rio Celeste in Costa Rica, where I was a couple of weeks ago. And all you do is open your picture in Photoshop, go to filter, blur, motion blur, and now you can play with your angle. So since the river was flowing, I did a diagonal angle, and you can play with how far your angle is. So you can do a distance angle as well as a directional angle. Simple, real easy, real easy, no layers involved. So simple and easy, try that one. And then this is a Photoshop motion blur. I leave this in that the image should be 8-bit. It might be with the latest version, 2020 version. 2022 version, we don't need to go 8-bit, but I'm just giving that to you just in case. So if you open your picture and you go to filter, filter gallery and path blur, and you don't see path blur activated, then it might be you have to move your picture to 8-bit. We're kind of getting away from that, but I leave it as just a word of warning just in case. And then you can go to, this is what your screen looks like, path blur right here. This is what your screen looks like. And then you can decide how fast you're going to go and whether you're going to go from the center. Here's your spin blur. And Jean and Becky, I know you all played with this with the Camera Club, didn't you all? Remember when we were doing those? No?
Are they on mute?
Yeah, y'all are on mute.
Yeah, I don't remember that. If we would have done it in Becky's composition, I think.
We did those swirly things.
Hmm.
I remember when we did them. I'm probably giving them another word. But see this spin blur right here and this tilt blur and this iris blur? There are all kinds of fun blurs here, and they are just under Photoshop filter, blur gallery, and then you can choose any of these. But once you get into this tool, you can go any one of them that you want to.
Is that also in Lightroom? Is that how you get to Photoshop or a separate Photoshop?
From Lightroom, you would go down to photo, edit in, and then go over to Photoshop.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, these are some of the reasons we still need Photoshop for these type of things. And then there's also a strobe, which is right here under motion effects. I'll show you that in just a second. But when you get into your path blur, you start out with a point and a point and a point in between in a straight line. And now you can drag the back point, you can drag the front point, and if you drag the middle point, we can start going into a circle. And so that's what this is. So all you do is you just start with your back point, drag it wherever you want, start with your front point, drag it wherever you want. And if you want to make it into a circle, then you then go to your middle point and you start dragging it out. And we can make as big a circle as we want or as small a circle as we want. And then that starts giving you this, what's called a path blur. And so that's what gave me this beginning blur of this photograph. I'm not going to tell you this is good. I'm just going to use it as an illustration. And then there's this other thing right here under motion effect. That's a strobe. So it's as if we took flash picture after flash picture after flash picture and then layered them on top of each other. I don't think it worked as well as I thought it was going to work, but this is for you to play with as well. So this is that little motion effect. So all of this is under filter, blur, path blur, and then you go into this whole tool set. So now you've got this whole tool set to play with. So if you don't have any motion blurs right now, you can play with motion blurs right now. And so you can take your solid photo and put it over your motion blurred photo, and then, use those in layers and go in and paint it out. So it's not as though you have to have these right now. You can make them if you want to. And this is a close-up of what that strobe blur did. So it's these little hashy marks right in here. See this little stuff right in there?
Right.
Yeah. So it wasn't a great example, but at least you see a little bit of what that strobe effect does. And by the way, instead of taking those 20 or 30 photos in the field, you could always take those 20 or 30 photos, one picture, and then keep blurring it in different ways and then stack them all on top of each other and then play with that Ventosa technique. So if you had a lot of time, you can do that one, okay? Or a lot of inclination. There are some good resources out there. This website, ICM Photo Magazine, there's some people doing some great stuff. And it is worthwhile to just kind of look at what other people are doing. And in this ICM Photo Magazine, they do have articles telling you step by step by step by step by step how they did them. So this is good. In photography, we copy each other all the time. But because the light's always different and our cameras are different and the scene is different, we never create the same photo. So there is nothing wrong with copying somebody. Because it just means, we go out on field trips or we go out on tours. Those of you that have been on photography field trips know this, that we all get to the same location and we all come up with something different. But we look at somebody's camera and we say, oh my gosh, how'd you do that? And this is how we learn from each other. This is why we like hanging out with each other. Mm-hmm. On Facebook, there is an intentional camera movement group. And it does have, last I looked, 3,400 members. So you do have to ask to be a member of it. So it's a private group, but there are some great examples of intentional camera movement there. And then Instagram, if you just look under hashtag intentional camera movement, how many of you all are Instagram? Yeah. Okay. So Instagram, you know, when you push your hashtags on there, it goes to the page of whoever created that hashtag first. So on the intentional camera movement hashtag page, there are a lot of really good examples. There's a lot of garbage because people have hashtagged stuff that's not really intentional camera movement. There's a lot of garbage, but there are some really good ideas, really cool ideas. So go see what other people have done, and then that'll give you some ideas as well. So I'll give you a chance. Remember, there's a recording of this, so this will come on the recording. Anybody have any other resources that you've visited that are worth sharing? No? Okay. And then, by the way, the ICM Photo Magazine, some of those articles include the how to do things in Photoshop. So there's some good ideas there as well. And then coming up for me, I've got all kinds of classes coming up. I'm in I'm not leading a tour between now and February, so I've got all kinds of classes coming up. Intro to Lightroom, Adobe Camera Raw, and Elements is coming up tomorrow night. So if you need an intro class in all of those, or tomorrow morning, I'm sorry, same time. Which lens should I use if you need that class? Just talking about all the different lenses out there and why you would use them for one reason or the other. Crystal ball class is coming up on the 23rd. If you think intentional camera movement is fun, wait till you learn crystal ball. That's really a lot of fun. In Costa Rica, there were a couple of women that just had cell phones, and I gave them my crystal ball early in the trip, and they were off in the jungle playing around with crystal ball once they learned how to do that. And they did all kinds of cool stuff. And I finally got my crystal ball back at the end of the trip. And then night photography starts tonight, and that's a 4-week class, more advanced, with homework assignments. So that's coming up tonight. If you want to enroll in that, there's still time. And then textures night master's class that comes up next week, 4 sessions, homework assignments, and a great way to learn layers in Photoshop. You don't have to be an advanced photographer for that one at all. It's just a great way to learn layers. Because, you know, the layers are very complicated, and the more you work with them, the more you learn. And that's all there is to it. You just have to get in there and play around with it. I've got a workshop coming up in January for Texas Hill Country birds. This will be winter birds. We stay on a ranch. And so you park your car and you don't have to get back in your car for the next 4 days. Some of you all have been there. Jean, you've been there before, haven't you? To the Block Creek? No? Long time ago, I thought. And then spring birds and the Texas Hill Country, same ranch, same setup. Big Bend in August 22 for lightning and or Milky Way. So if it rains, we'll get lightning. If it doesn't rain, we'll get Milky Way. And then if you want to go with me on my tours, Costa Rica cloud forest birds are coming up. Alaska Whales has 1 opening, and then the Romania Danube Delta bird migration, birds coming up from Africa and the Middle East, flying through their European migration, will be down in the Danube Delta chasing birds in boats. Really cool. Romania is a really cool country, very interesting. So that's coming up in May. Marie, you're going with me Norway, right?
Norway, yes.
Norway. She's doing
Very
Norway.
excited.
Yeah, Norway's coming up in September also. So all that's on my
It's
website.
too far away.
Yeah, too far away. It'll be here
It
before we
is.
know it, though.
I
Yeah.
know.
Okay, so here's all my contact information. Any questions for me or anything that I didn't cover?
I think you're going to Ireland too, aren't you?
Ireland in September. Yes. Yeah. Northern Ireland.
So Kathy, if we're able to do some of these and come up with something interesting, we're going to send it to you, right?
Send it to me. I would love to see it. Yeah, send me a link to wherever you posted it. Or if you want to put it on my Facebook page, then I can see it. Or if you just want to email it to me, I'd love to see what you come up with.
Great.
Because then I can steal your idea.
Right.
Add it to my portfolio, you know.
At Mercer Arboretum, they do have a bunch of bamboo.
Oh,
So
yeah,
you could do this there.
that would be a good place. Any of the arboretums would be a good place to do this. Yes.
This is gorgeous.
Yeah.
This is fun. I mean, I have been looking at these kind of pictures forever, and of course, I didn't have any instruction, so I would just go out and try to move the camera. And I told you I was inspired because I made a mistake and I deleted it, and I regretted it.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the mistake also of tagging it in Lightroom as like a 5. So it keeps coming up every time I go into my list of 5s, but I can't access it
Oh, because you threw it away.
because I threw it away. So,
Yes.
so this is probably my favorite kind of photography though, at least right now.
There are people also who camera on tripod looking down on a pond and the koi are swimming around or the ducks are swimming around. You can also get really interesting movements that way. And that's one, Marie, that eons and eons ago in the slide days, I threw some of those away and then Art Wolf showed them and I went, darn, I threw mine away. And it just took an artist to be able to pick out that there really was art there. So
Right.
we got to figure out where the art is.
So
Okay.
this picture that's on the screen now,
Yes.
is this one of the ones that you layered, or?
This is no layers. This is the beginning of the movement, or this is the movement. And then I did layer it on a solid shot.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I showed this one to you where I layered them on a solid shot, but it was a really nice overcast forest with a lot of ferns on the forest floor, made a great motion blur, and then still shot and layer it over with the ferns. Yeah. It's got potential.
So pretty. I
Yeah.
like that.
Thanks. Okay, any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed spending the morning with you all. It's good to see faces. Yeah, good to see
Yeah.
all of you all. Yeah. So I hope
Thank
to
you
see
so
you in
much.
another class someday soon. Share your photos with me, and then I will share the recording with you when it's finished.
Okay, great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Who said something?
Oh, I was just saying, thank you, Kathy.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. I will see all of you all again someday soon, hopefully face to face, but if not, see ya. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
Can't wait to
Bye.
try this.
Good. I hope I inspired you. Yeah.
You
Have
did.
fun.
Bye-bye.
That's what I was going for.
Yes. A little inspiration is all we need sometimes.